Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by Previs Pro, Instabug, and Hover. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is a very tired Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello. That is a very apt description of my current status. Yes. Hi, John. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. You're hanging in there. I hope you've gotten a little rest since you published your iOS and iPadOS 14 review.
I really haven't.
Yeah, you know, there's something about how I feel like when you and I first started working together, there was this period in the fall that was very intense and busy, and it was maybe, 3, 4, 5 weeks long, but now it feels like it's months long.
Yeah, it never stops. It feels like it's... I don't think I ever stopped since the Magic Keyboard came out in May. Like, I think it's been a long process starting there with iPadOS 13.4. I guess I did have like a 1 week break in early June because I figured I might as well just go to the beach because there's no WWDC, so I'm just gonna spend these few days at the beach with Sylvia and the dogs because I don't need to leave the country. But then it's like I never stopped, and it was like WWDC and then work on the review and then the unexpected release of iOS and the iPad Air event, and then finish the review, and then the iPhone event, and then there's new stuff coming out. And so I'm still working and writing.
And don't forget the club anniversary, which was right before the first Apple event. So that was in there too.
That also happened. So it's good. It's good to be tired though, because it means that you have stuff to do, which means that, you know, because we run a website and a newsletter and, you know, a membership program, it means that there's people paying attention and caring about what we do. So it's a good tired, I think.
It is a good tired, and we've heard from a lot of people over the last several weeks, both who have been encouraging you with your review and also, you know, sending us notes about the club. And it is always very nice to get all those messages from people. It kind of keeps us going when we're in one of these busy periods. So Federico, I thought today what we should do is, because our last episode was about your review and the day before we had an Apple event, we should kind of rewind and get back to that Apple event. And this being App Stories,
is that another podcast? Mac Stories Rewind? Is that another?
No, that's Unwind. That's Unwind. But we rewind during Unwind. It's all very confusing, Federico. But I thought, this being App Stories, we got to talk about some of the app implications of that event and what was announced, what it means for third-party developers, what people might expect to see down the road. Just go through that event, which was, you know, it was all about the iPhone 12 and the HomePod. So I think there's probably more to talk about with the HomePod, but why don't we dive in and talk a little bit about what we saw at that event?
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about the Home app. I think by far the most interesting thing that I saw, it's the new proximity-based integration between the iPhone and the HomePod Mini. So the HomePod Mini is going to offer support for the U1 chip and the ultra-wideband communication. So proximity-based communication between the HomePod and other devices that have the U1 chip that Apple added to the iPhone 11 last year, as well as to the iPhone SE, I believe, earlier this year. And of course, the iPhone 12 line, they all featured the U1 chip. And we never really saw that many implementations of proximity-based features from Apple. This is one of them with the iPhone and the HomePod Mini. So when the HomePod Mini detects that an iPhone is nearby, you're going to either have music suggestions on the lock screen so that you can start playing something on the HomePod right away, but you will also be able to quickly and easily hand off media playback from the iPhone to the HomePod. And you may think, but you can already do handoff with the iPhone and HomePod by placing the iPhone on top of the regular HomePod.
Right.
And I guess it's a similar feature, but this one is going to be more accurate because of the U1 chip and the ultra wideband communication. That's my understanding.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's right. And it also, they're adding some haptic feedback and sound features with it, which I mean, the difficulty with an event like this being remote is you have no way to, there's no hands-on area. We haven't actually tried this. We have no way of knowing exactly how it works, but it was described as a way to make the two devices feel more connected, so that you get that feedback when the music actually hands off, instead of kind of like standing there waving your phone randomly on top of it, I guess.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting that the idea of having music suggestions on the lock screen, I think, and this is my personal theory, but I do think it is based on the upcoming iOS 14.2, which is currently in beta for developers, because one of the features of 14.2 is this redesigned now playing control that you get in Control Center, but that you also get on the lock screen. So the idea would be, and this is actually covered in my iOS 14 review because I included 14.2 features. The idea is that if nothing is playing, you get this redesigned now playing control that shows you a grid of items. They can either be albums from Apple Music or podcast episodes from the Podcasts app. And when you tap them, you can start playing the item with one tap right there from the now playing control, either on the lock screen or Control Center. So I think what Apple is doing here, they're basically saying, because they haven't officially said that, it's my theory, but I think it's a correct theory. With 14.2, you will be able to tap your phone on the HomePod Mini. If nothing is playing, because the HomePod Mini doesn't actually have a screen, on your iPhone, you will see this now playing control pop up on the lock screen, offering a series of suggestions for albums and podcast episodes. And those are based on your recent activity, right? And you can tap one and you start playing that item on the HomePod Mini right away, which I think is going to be a very nice flow of, like, you tap the phone, you see suggestions, you pick one, you start listening. I think it's going to be very nice.
Yeah, it's kind of an extension of a feature that we've had already for a while. One is the personal radio station, where you just can tell your HomePod, play me something I like, and it'll do something based on your personal tastes, which I use a fair amount. I mean, whenever I can't really think of what I want to listen to, I'll do that just for background music or something in the house. And the other one is, and you're going to have to help me with what it's called. It's the infinity symbol in the music app where you
autoplay.
Autoplay, right. Autoplay, when you're listening to, for instance, a playlist and it runs out of music, autoplay will continue playing a similar set of music, which I don't know if you've used this a lot, but I have over the summer, and I really like it because, especially when I'm doing a long writing session, you don't end up with that dead silence. It just keeps going, and I often forget that I'm not in a playlist anymore because it does a very good job of kind of matching the genres and types of music that you've had in the playlist.
Yeah, I feel like autoplay is an acquired taste. I've never been an autoplay person myself, like back in the days of Spotify, and even before that, RDO, which used to be a music streaming service. They used to offer similar features for, like, keep the music playing. Right. And I've always been the type of person who likes to fully control every single item in their App Next queue.
I am not shocked.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know myself.
I know you well enough.
Sylvia believes that I have some form of, like, trust issues or, like, micromanagement issues.
I don't know about trust issues, but micromanagement, I think she might be onto something.
No, in the sense of, like, you need to control everything yourself.
Right.
And you don't trust anybody else or any other system to do it for you.
Got it.
And I think she does have a point, which is something that I'm learning to do more and more. But in any case,
we'll save that for Unplugged. We'll save that for Mac Stories Unplugged.
Topic for what is Mac Stories Unplugged, John?
That is our Club Mac Stories exclusive podcast, and it's a really fun show. You and I talk about just about anything that happens to be on our minds.
Behind the scenes, therapy sessions. It's about everything.
Wild animals.
American culture. Yes,
food.
All of it. Food. But I do think that even though it's like I'm learning to like autoplay, I do understand why it can be convenient. Because, like, you're working, you don't have to care about managing your queue. I just need to learn how to let go of the idea.
You do. I like it a lot. I think people should try it. And And despite the fact that Federico can't handle it, I think it's a good feature. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Previs Pro. I'm excited to share this incredible storyboarding iPad and iPhone app with you because it's a terrific example of what an advanced pro-level iPad app can do. Storyboards are a vital part of the creative development process for big video productions, but they're expensive, and they tend to be low-quality affairs that miss a lot of important details. They're also difficult to revise because they're static and they're not camera-ready. Previs Pro fixes all that. The app lets you create and iterate with 3D accurate storyboards without having to be an artist. Previs Pro lets you build a storyboard quickly, easily, and anywhere you happen to be with a professional level of polish that's just amazing. There's a ton of cool tech happening under the hood, too. The app has a library of pre-built poses for characters in a scene, but you can also create your own using Pose Cap, a feature that uses Core ML to capture poses using your device's camera. There's also another feature called Face Cap that does the same thing with facial expressions. There's a library of pre-built facial expressions, or you can record your own with your camera. The app is using the Unity 3D engine under the hood too, delivering sophisticated 3D views throughout the app. And there's even an AR mode, so you can take your characters out into the real world, pose them on set, and see them against a realistic backdrop. You can even use 2D and 3D models as backdrops and take photos and use those as backdrops too, adding an extra level of detail and realism to your storyboards. Finally, I want to mention too that you can import screenplays from Final Draft, tagging scenes, importing descriptions, and pre-populating your cast members in scenes, letting you move more quickly than ever. Previs Pro is built by veteran Mac and iOS developers who got their start with Freeverse, making games for the Mac and iOS that won tons of awards, so you know the quality of Previs Pro is amazing. On top of that, the app is also available as a subscription or a one-time payment to suit everyone's needs. Go to previspro.com to learn more. I'll put a link in the show notes too, and if you use that, they'll know you came from App Stories, which would be terrific. And they're giving away a year of masterclass, which is a great way to hone your filmmaking skills. So look for the link in the show notes and sign up for a chance to win a year of masterclass. Previs Pro, the storyboarding app for iOS. Our thanks to Previs Pro for their support of the show.
You know the details of Intercom, which is one of the big features that Apple announced at the iPhone event for the HomePod family, but also other devices, right?
Exactly. So Intercom is really interesting. I don't think anybody saw this coming. It's a little bit, I guess, like the walkie-talkie feature that I've used a total of one time on my watch, but it's more convenient than having to just talk from watch to watch. What it is it allows you to use Siri commands to send audio messages throughout your house to other HomePods. So if you have multiple HomePods, you can command Siri to send the message to all of them or to a particular one, and it works beyond just the HomePods themselves. It also works with the Apple Watch, the iPhone, the iPad, and even with AirPods. So if someone's listening using AirPods on a device, they'll get the message that way as well. And on top of that, CarPlay. It works even with CarPlay. So you're out running errands and you want to tell someone at home, I'm on my way back. You just do the command from your car and it'll broadcast on your HomePods. It's a little different the way it's implemented on devices. On devices, because who knows where you happen to be or what you happen to be doing, you get a notification with a play button, so you don't have to, it won't just start blurting audio out of your iPhone, in a circumstance that you don't want it to. So a little different there. The conspicuous thing that's absent though is the Mac. Apparently this is not a Mac thing, sad trombone sound for Mac people, but who knows, maybe with Apple Silicon, this is going to come. I think I'm pinning an awful lot of hopes on Apple Silicon these days, Federico. I think it's going to cure all the problems of everything. Actually,
how do you feel about that belief?
Actually, I think I'm going to be sorely disappointed as well.
Yes, I think you will.
That's what I think about that belief. But yes, so that's how it works. It looks like a nice alternative, I suppose, to something like a group text message thread, which is one way a lot of times I'll let my family know what's going on, or maybe I'll just text one person I'm on my way home or something like that. I can definitely see doing this in the car. Now, you can also send text messages in CarPlay using, dictation and Siri. So, but this is just a slightly different way. And I definitely want to try to use this with my son, who's always got AirPods in, and I'm always trying to tell him it's time for dinner, and he never hears me. So now he has no way to escape me.
Yeah, too bad my apartment is so small. The intercom feature is going to be useless because you can just hear me talking from behind the door.
Right.
There's no point. There's no point in using intercom. But you do have multiple floors, right?
Yes.
At your place?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Yeah, so it'll be helpful. Right. And
Yeah.
the upstairs doesn't have a lot of this stuff. I mean, this is one thing that I wrote about in the club newsletter this week, which is I think what the HomePod Mini is meant to do is obviously a lot like what Amazon has done, and Google for that matter, which is if you can get multiple of these HomePod Minis, all of a sudden Siri is actually a lot more useful because it's probably within earshot wherever you are.
Right.
For the price of one big HomePod, you can get 3 little ones. And for a lot of rooms in someone's house, maybe you don't need that big one. I know that in my office, I have the big HomePod, and I rarely get the volume up higher than maybe 20% because it's just not a very big room. So, and I'm sitting pretty close to it. So I could definitely see, switching out a mini here in my office and then taking the big one and pairing it with the one in my living room for watching TV, since that's going to have better connectivity with the Apple TV. I think we're kind of heading towards a place where Apple has figured out or is pointing in a direction towards taking over the home in a little bit more complete way, making it an option, I guess, at least, to have this glue that's in between the times when you're not using devices, so that you still have kind of an operating system for your home, whether it's controlling your lights, your other HomeKit devices, asking questions, sending messages, that kind of thing, without having to pull out your phone or an iPad or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they're moving in the right direction here. All these new integrations, even in iOS 14, how they have simplified like the onboarding process for adding a new accessory, but especially for adding automations. So when you configure an accessory that the system thinks it could be useful in an automation context, you will get automation suggestions right away during the setup process. But also when you open the details screen for an accessory, you get more automation suggestions there. So Apple's sort of saying, we want to remove this learning curve that there can be to setting up automations and making sure that it can be easier for you to have a smart home where things happen and you don't have to do them manually all the time. And so that's really interesting. The intercom feature supporting multiple devices, really fascinating. The integration with proximity between the iPhone and the HomePod Mini, I think this is something that we're going to see more and more. I wouldn't be shocked at all if there's a new Apple TV model that also has the U1 chip inside. I think proximity is one of the areas where we're going to keep seeing more and more integrations. Maybe the next Apple TV remote will have the U1 chip in it. I don't know, but I think Apple is going to do something there. And also slowly opening up to third parties, of course, also something that Apple needs to do. In theory, you should be able at some point to set third party music streaming services as your default on the HomePod. I don't think I've seen the option yet. I just know that Apple announced it at WWDC. So I think it should be coming at some point. I mean, they showed it off with the HomePod Mini. So I'm guessing that whatever 14.2 is going to be called on the HomePod, I think that will enable the feature. I am curious to see what all of this means in terms of integration with the Apple TV, because I saw that you will be able to have Dolby Atmos playback on a HomePod configured to be the Apple TV speaker. And I think you can also, if I'm not mistaken, I think I saw in settings in the Home app in 14.2 that you can permanently associate a HomePod to be the speaker for an Apple TV. So it's not like you need to do it manually every single time you turn on your Apple TV and you want to watch a movie. Now you can say this HomePod should always be connected to the Apple TV as a speaker. And I do have a Dolby Atmos compatible TV and Apple TV 4K. So I kind of want to do a comparison there. when it becomes available as an option. I want to see does the TV sound better than the HomePod, or is the HomePod a better Dolby Atmos speaker than my 2017 LG television? So I think there's a lot of things happening in HomeKit and the Home app this year. I really wish that the Home app went through a bit of a redesign, though. And you've been a vocal critic, I guess, of the Home app design.
Yeah, I'm still not a fan of those big clunky tiles, and I think it's the iPad version is an improvement because they've adopted the sidebar, right? And that makes it easier to navigate between rooms compared to the iPhone where you have to tap on the home icon and there's a drop down, which to me is just kind of a tedious way to, I mean, I know you can swipe between rooms, but depending on how many rooms you have set up, that's not necessarily super efficient either. So I do feel like the iPhone design really shows its age. The iPad I can live with because it's got the sidebar and it's easier to kind of move around between the different rooms. And the Mac is that way too because the Mac has the sidebar now too with Big Sur once that comes out. So I'm happier with the way the Home app is now today than it's been in the past, although I'm still not super happy with the iPhone version. And that's kind of a shame because really that's where I use that app the most. It's just because it's in your pocket and it's you're heading out the door and you want to shut off the lights or something. That's how I do it. So it is a shame that it's not been redesigned on the iPhone, but it is better. And I also it's nice to see the HomePod becoming better integrated with the Apple TV because that really felt like it should have been that way from the very start. The HomePod feels like a product that was designed exclusively for music and to be very much a standalone device that didn't really integrate a lot with anything else. Now, I know it still had HomeKit support and Siri support and that sort of thing, but it still was a bit of an island early on. And I really like how it's being integrated into entertainment more within the home. I mean, it absolutely makes sense for it to be something that can be connected to the Apple TV and play back your TV shows as you're watching something. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Instabug. Instabug has some great news for the developers in the audience. Following the success of their bug and crash reporting SDK, Instabug just launched its new application performance monitoring. This is a great feature because it helps you take a proactive approach to app performance and quality. Head off those issues before they're a crisis. Get a window into what your users are really experiencing before they get a chance to complain. Find performance metrics on crashes, slow screen transitions, client-side network latency, or UI hangs all in one place. Spot if your users are encountering UI hangs in any of your app screens. Utilize performance patterns to narrow down your investigations and resolve your app-critical issues faster. Balance between performance improvements and new features. Align your team around one quality metric to decide whether to build versus fix. Get started now and join the top mobile teams like Verizon, Venti Privé, and Lyft, relying on Instabug for app quality. Go to try.instabug.com/appstories right now to get started. Again, that URL, try.instabug.com/appstories. Instabug, application performance monitoring built for mobile. Our thanks to Instabug for their support of App Stories.
Let's talk about Siri because we also got some news on the Siri front at the last event, right?
Yes, it's very hard to keep track of what's new with Siri and what's not because everything changes server side and there's no settings or things in any of the devices to really tell what's new. But Apple announces these things, and there have been some improvements that are either out now or on their way. Why don't you run through a couple of them, Federico?
So Apple said, and I also included this in my review, that Siri knows 20 times more facts compared to 3 years ago. And Apple likes to provide these examples of now you can ask questions like, how do seasons work? Or
right.
What, there was another one that it's like, like I get it. It's cool that you can ask these questions, but like, is it really a practical example of the things that people ask Siri? Like, can you imagine asking Siri, how does the spring work? It's like, okay,
Right.
sure. It's I guess it's cool that Siri has more web-based knowledge, but I don't know. And anyway, it's really hard to measure because we don't have a list of these queries, and Apple just says 20 times more facts compared to 2017. So we're just gotta trust what they say. And obviously, now the neural engine is helping with dictation. So Siri dictation is now running entirely on device, which is new in iOS 14. Apple says that speech recognition got faster. There's a bunch of new integrations, and of course, there's the new compact UI. Siri in general in iOS 14 is trying to be smarter in terms of getting to the core of your question. So if you ask, for example, how old is Barack Obama, you will get that result right away. And it's just a small snippet with a photo of Obama and his age instead of a bigger presentation card as it used to be in 13. So it's a combination of Siri having more knowledge than before, being faster, having offline on-device dictation, and trying to be more intelligent in getting to the core of your question.
I think Apple also says that Siri's less chatty, which I think is probably true based on my experience.
Yeah, it's part of Compact UI, I think. I think it's part of Compact UI, though. Like, getting to the core of your request, it means to provide you with a shorter, more effective result right away, instead of diluting the conversation with additional details that you may not necessarily need.
Right.
I think that's part of what Apple is saying with compact Siri. It's compact visually speaking, and also from a voice response perspective. So the feature that Apple showed off at the last event, it's called the personal update. And Apple showed it off with a video of people asking the HomePod, what's my update? And basically, what's my update? It provides you with a summary of various things. Like, it gives you a summary of the current weather conditions, how long your commute to work is going to be, what's coming up in your calendar, what's coming up in your reminders. And lastly, it gives you the option to listen to the news, to get a quick news update from compatible podcast stations like NPR News, for example. Now, Apple showed it off on the HomePod Mini. So this is going to be for sure a feature of the HomePod Mini. But I was also able to try this on iOS 14.2 beta. So I tried it on my phone, and the first time you ask Siri, what's my update? You get an introductory message explaining to you what your personal update is. And then when you run it, you get exactly what Apple showed off at the event. Commute times, calendar events, weather conditions, your reminders, and a quick news update from, in my case, I always got NPR News Now. Now, interesting enough here, if you don't have the podcasts app installed on your device, which I didn't, because during after I was done writing about podcasts, I deleted the app from my iPhone because I couldn't be bothered to go in and change the settings for auto download. Podcast kept downloading episodes on my iPhone, and I just didn't have the energy to go in and change the settings. So I just deleted the app. And because I didn't have the app installed, Personal Update said, I can give you the news unless you install podcasts on your device. But you can also remove the news. If you don't want the segment, you can say remove the news from my update, and you will not get the news portion anymore. So I think Personal Update is going to be an interesting addition, especially to the HomePod, as like a stationary assistant that you keep in your home. Obviously, the thing here is that because you cannot set third-party defaults for Siri, the utility of this feature is going to be based on whether you do use Apple's built-in apps or not. So it's not like you can say, well, instead of giving me my personal update and read my data from reminders, I don't use reminders, I use things, or I use OmniFocus. Can't you give me tasks from those? And it doesn't seem like it will. even though those apps actually do support Siri Kit and they do have integration with Siri to give you to save tasks and to fetch tasks.
Right.
But this is limited to Apple's own built-in apps. So I think Personal Update could be a lot more fascinating with support for third-party clients, for third-party apps, instead of just like maps, calendar, reminders, and weather and podcasts.
Right. One thing that I would add is my understanding is that the Personal Update is smart too, in the sense that if it's midday, it's not going to give you your commute time, because it's going to assume that you want that at the beginning of your day and at the end of your day and not in the middle. So it's supposed to be smart about how it does these things as well. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Hover. When you have that one big idea, where do you go? Well, your business starts with a domain name. So for many entrepreneurs, Hover is that big leap. Hover has over 300 domain name extensions to choose from. No matter what you want to build, there's a domain name waiting for it. And they have excellent technical support to answer any questions that might come up. They're dedicated to getting you online, not upselling you. Hover has free Whois privacy so the bad guys can't get your info, and an incredibly clean user experience and user interface, plus monthly sales on popular top-level domains. It's easy to see why Hover is the popular choice for people starting a business. If you're starting a new online project, one of the most important things is the name. And the best place to get started in trying out those names and figuring out what the name of your project is going to be is to go to Hover, because you want something that's simple, memorable, and sticks in people's heads. And with Hover's great search and long list of domain extensions, you can find the name that works for your project. That's exactly what I did when I started my business. I came up with some names, went over to Hover, started doing some searches, and took it from there. We know you like intuitive user experiences and things that just work right out of the box. So that's why I think you'll appreciate Hover. It worked for me, and I think it will work for you too. Their UX and UI is really simple, clean, and easy to navigate. Buy your domain and start using it today. Go to hover.com/appstories and get 10% off all new purchases. That URL one more time, hover.com/appstories. Make a name for yourself with Hover. Our thanks to Hover for their support of the show. All right, Federico, let's switch on over to the camera, because we got a lot of information from Apple at the event about the new camera features. And it's always a little hard to track this from phone to phone, only because there's a combination of different hardware on different phones, as well as different software features, some of which are supported by the hardware and some of which are not. So it gets a little confusing from phone to phone. What's definitely true, though, is that the Pro Max has everything, because it's got the best hardware, and it can support the highest end software features as well. Now, in terms of apps, though, probably the most interesting and important thing for developers, and as a result, users in the end, is this new RAW format that Apple is going to roll out later this year called Pro RAW. Now, this is only going to be possible to shoot in on the Pro cameras, which is interesting because it's not clear that there's a hardware limitation that prevents it from being used shot on the Mini or the iPhone 12, except that there has been some speculation. I know John Gruber wrote about this. There is more RAM in the Pro models. I think it's 6 gigabytes on the Pro phones and 4 gigabytes on the other phones, and that might be the difference. But who knows at this point? It's not entirely clear. But what is Pro RAW? Pro RAW is a new format that combines.
It's very hard to say, right? Pro RAW.
Pro RAW. It is a little bit of a mouthful, and this is the first time I've really said it out loud. So here we go. But it combines the benefits of shooting RAW, which has more information, allowing you greater latitude in editing different aspects of an image, with all of the smarts of the computational photography that Apple talked about at the event. So what that means is that you have a raw image, but a raw image doesn't have associated with it all that computational photography, all those all those changes that Apple makes to make the image look good. Things like Smart HDR3 or Deep Fusion or all those other things that they tout. So what this format allows for, as I understand it, is it's like a package. You can think of it as the raw camera image with a bunch of software steps to get to the final product that you see when you take a photo with your iPhone. So developers will have the ability to both access that raw file as well as all those steps that get it to the final product, allowing then for apps to be developed that allow users to tweak each of those individual pieces, where, whether it's a brightness adjustment or, a luminance adjustment, or it's how much deep fusion is applied. I think they didn't go, Apple didn't go into it in any detail, but it's essentially access to the entire workflow, if you will. If you think of it as an image and then a series of processes that are applied to that image, the developers will have access to those steps, allowing users to then adjust them individually, which I think is really exciting.
So the things that the system does to photos, like whenever you take a picture, all those steps that the system does for you behind the scenes, they are opening those up with ProRAW to developers. Is that right? Like all the things that...
Yes, that is my understanding, is the way it's going to work. Now, this is a new format. There is not an API yet. There's going to be an API for third-party developers. I think it's going to be a little while before we see apps that take advantage of this, because it sounds potentially fairly complex, but it could make for some really interesting photography apps down the road.
It's really interesting, the idea of, because you could argue that that's like a competitive advantage of using the camera, right? And they're opening that up and they're saying, look, you can take a look at the raw photo and all the steps, and then you can
Yeah, think of it too, like if you've ever used Halide before. Halide had a smart HDR, a smart RAW I think they call it smart RAW. I may be getting the terminology wrong, but they had a raw image that they would then apply their own filters and adjustments to get something that looks nicer than just the raw image itself. This is similar to that, I think, in that you start with the raw image, you apply a bunch of filters and adjustments to it, and out pops the better looking photo, but you can go back and you can tweak those steps if you don't like what was done automatically. And I think that's, that puts an awful lot of control in the hands of users ultimately. It's something that I hope, we see with a lot of the pro photography apps. I'd love to see it in, all sorts of things, whether it's Lightroom or Darkroom or Halide or all sorts of other apps.
Yeah, because I guess you could argue that by doing this, Apple is saying, look, what matters to us is not that you use the camera app, is that you use an iPhone to take pictures.
Exactly.
Like they're selling you the iPhone as a camera. They're not selling you the camera app. Apple is fine if you're a pro photographer and you want to use something else, we're cool with it as long as you're using an iPhone.
Yep.
And you're buying an iPhone Pro to do that. Yeah, I think I guess from that point of view, I shouldn't be surprised, because Apple is selling you the hardware and they're saying, and we can open up the software for you. If you're look, most people are not going to care about ProRAW, right? Most people just take pictures. I mean, I take pictures by opening the camera from the lock screen, like 95% of the time.
Oh yeah, same here.
I never, I don't even have the camera icon on my home screen, because if I need to open the camera when my iPhone is unlocked, I just open Control Center. So, but for users who want to have more control, I think it's awesome that Apple is opening it up with a. This is kind of like a follow-up to, because they do have ProRes as a video thing, right? And this is ProRAW for pictures. They do have ProRes for video, I think, on the Mac.
The other thing, Federico, too, we should mention is the video that these iPhones can take. And on the iPhone 12 Pro Max, you can take 4K 60 frame per second Dolby Vision HDR video.
Wow.
Now, that's a huge mouthful. the other phones can
means
do
I
the
can
same.
be a movie director now. That's
I
what
know.
it means.
The other phones can take the same sort of video, but it's at 30 frames per second. Only the big camera does 60 frames per second. So you got to get all the FPS that you can. So get that big boy camera. But there's not a separate format here to talk about, but it does allow for some incredibly high definition video to be taken, and that of course can be exported and edited and manipulated in other apps, whether it's on an iPad or an iPhone or on a Mac or whatever it happens to be. So it's interesting to me. I mean, I think it's really that video that they showed that a famous director, I forget who his name was. I think he's from Spain.
Oh yeah,
with the horse video.
Yes,
it looked very nice.
Really pretty horses.
Yes, very pretty horses. But yes, that's something that can be done now. And especially with the Pro Max, with the image stabilization that is applied on the sensor level instead of to the lens of the camera, that means you can take both much steadier video, and it should also mean that you can take much steadier night and clearer nighttime shots because the sensor is going to be stabilized, which helps you hold the camera still for longer exposures.
Yeah. I don't know. I think this all means that I can be the next Christopher Nolan.
I think it does.
Yeah.
You could do the Batman of Rome. You can go down into the subway and shoot
the Batman of Rome. No, I mean, this is very impressive. Like the idea that, and also like, I think I saw on Twitter that the iPhone is not like shooting directly in Dolby Vision. They are shooting in 10-bit HDR and then they're encoding in Dolby Vision, something like that.
Okay, well that makes sense, I guess. But yes, 10-bit. It's got 10 bits of depth, which is better than 9 bits. I know that much.
Yeah, for sure. Like you want all of those 10 bits as much as possible.
One for every finger.
I just is that how it works?
Yeah, you don't want to leave out your pinky or anything like that.
So, I do think it's impressive. I think it's impressive that you can have, like, I can take a video on my phone on the iPhone 12 Pro and I can play it in Dolby Vision on my TV. And I think that's honestly remarkable.
Yeah, it is.
So, yeah, I really want to play around with this stuff, and I want to try all the differences between the standard iPhone 12, if possible, and the iPhone 12 Pro. And I want to see what difference does it make in practice to shoot Dolby Vision HDR content at 60 frames. That could be really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to it myself. Well, Federico, I think that's a good place to stop. We've pretty much covered everything that happened at the event. It was a fun event. I'm really looking forward to trying the HomePod Mini. I'm definitely going to get at least one of those for my home, maybe a couple at least. I want to thank our 3 sponsors again. That's Previs Pro, Instabug, and Hover. Of course, you can find me and Federico over at macstories.net. Federico is also on Twitter and Instagram, where he's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.